Starting us off in at number 10, Spider-Man and Zatanna. This team-up occurred in a Marvel team-up comic. We're talking Marvel Team-Up issue 81 from 1979. We're talking Marvel Team-Up issue 81 from 1979. It saw Peter Parker's web-slinger teaming up with the daughter of Satan, Zatanna. Creative name there, Satan. Not self-involved whatsoever. Anywho, this story, titled Last Rites, Doctor Strange finds himself manipulated by the Shiatra Book of the Damned, causing him to become an agent of Basilisk, turning him into a werewolf. Spider-Man has to track him down, and Zatanna gets involved, with her mission being to restore Doctor Strange's soul to normal or kill him as a last resort if she fails. By the end of the team-up, Zatanna is faced with a choice to either save her own life or save Strange's soul, and she ends up going with the Doctor's, which actually went over pretty well with fans because she wasn't a super overly popular character. And at number 9, the Micronauts and Baron Karza. This one is kind of weird. It's a team up between the Micronauts and Baron Karza. Karza is kind of like a cross between an evil knight, Darth Vader, and a sad Doctor Doom impersonator. He's the former royal chief scientist of Homeworld, who used his technology to overthrow the monarchy of Homeworld, taking control of a large chunk of the microverse before his archenemies, the Micronauts, defeated him. Here we see an instance where they were on the same side though. And their foe? Professor Charles Xavier. The team-up took place during the X-Men Micronauts crossover series, with the unlikely coupling leading Karza's fleet against a seemingly all-powerful entity. Turns out that this mysterious entity's power is traced to Charles Xavier. Spoiler alert, it's his dark side. And when they track him down at the X-Mansion, eventually this entity turns the mutants against the Micronauts, apparently kills a bunch of people, and Kitty Pryde and Karza sort of accidentally switch bodies. Things get weirder and devolve into the entity trying to rape Kitty, who is actually Karza, and this evil Xavier entity gets pervy with Danielle Moonstar to the point where he's actually psychically fondling her. Like, not even joking. The story ends with Xavier being the one who kills off the entity, although claims that the darkness inside of each of us is never fully gone, even when defeated. Ooh. Can we just talk about how an aspect of Xavier's personality just got real evil and pervy, and everyone was like totally cool with that, with him being like, I fixed it, don't worry guys, but it's still there deep down. Like, how are the X-Men not being like, yo, this is kind of Moving on to number 8, Doctor Doom and Namor. Namor, despite having quite antagonistic qualities, definitely qualifies as an anti-hero, so it should be no surprise that he was the hero side of this very first team-up in Marvel's Supervillain Team-Up Volume 1, Issue 1. The story starts with Namor getting huffy and calling off their alliance, and then Doom moping around about it and being all like, I don't need a lackey, I need a friend. So he decides that he's going to try to recruit Namor one more time to convince him otherwise, but he's super sketch about it. He ends up using a tracking device disguised as a fish to follow Namor, because that's totally a way to rebuild the trust of an ally who just abandoned you. Despite this, they team up again and all is going fine and dandy until Namor witnesses Doom executing one of Atoma's defenseless lackeys in Supervillain Team-Up Issue 3, causing the two of them to get into a big brawl in Supervillain Team-Up Issue 4. Sometimes you just gotta reel it in a bit, Victor. Come on dude, just take a step back. Don't be weird about it.
Number 7, Gotham. Gotham died not just once, but twice. This hero first appeared on the scene crime fighting alongside Gotham Girl, his sister. The duo both seemed to have heroic intentions, and in them Batman saw potential, so he took them under his wing. Unfortunately, both eventually turned to the dark side, becoming more villains than heroes, with Henry Clover Jr., aka Gotham, going on a murderous rampage due to the loss of his parents, combined with Psycho Pirate's manipulation of him. His powers started to destabilize, beginning to kill him, and eventually he died as a result. His sister attempted to bring him back, but once again overexerting his powers led to his demise shortly after his resurrection. And by demise, I mean he kinda sploded, so he's definitely dead now. R.I.P. Gotham.
Moving on to number 6, Dracula and the X-Men. Dracula has a peculiar history with the members of the X-Men in both the 616 and alternate realities. In the 616 continuity, despite having an unruly past together, the Mutant team and the infamous Vamp team up in order to restore the world of vampires in Curse of the Mutants, a storyline that took place between 2010 and 2011. Blade was there too. Essentially, they were forced to work together when Dracula's irritable son, Zarus, engineered a biological weapon that converted regular humans into vampires on a large scale. While no one died permanently, Jubilee technically died and became a child of the night, having been turned into a vampire during one of Zarus' attacks. Dracula hooked her up with an amulet to help her manage sunlight as a thank you gesture for the X-Men's help, and thus began a very strange period in Jubilee's narratives. Side note, she was eventually cured for vampirism, but it was a weird stage.
Number 5, Stephanie Brown. Stephanie Brown first debuted in Detective Comics number 647 in 1992, and managed to make quite a name for herself. The daughter of the Clue Master, she was seeking to forge her own path, and this led to her own vigilante identity as Spoiler. She would really take hold in Robin's comic, then Tim Drake, and would eventually decide to take on the mantle of Robin in her own right. It was here that her path would take a turn, and she would become involved in an arc called War Games. Here she would be attempting to assist Batman, but also he would not treat her exactly like other Robins. He wouldn't share information with her, information that would save her life, as she ended up inserting herself into all this gangland mafia warfare and she died as a result. This plot was extremely poorly received. When she was first seen in her hospital bed, fans were convinced she was gonna make it, and were devastated when she didn't, begging Batman to take care of her daughter. Even if you weren't the hugest fan of the character, how she was treated made Batman look terrible, when just some basic info could have saved her. Her death would sloppily be retconned a few years later.
Moving on to number 4, Galactus and Cosmic Ghost Rider. Frank Castle's Cosmic Ghost Rider hails from an alternate universe in which Thanos had won and killed off all of Earth's heroes. Now during that battle, Frank Castle hits his head via debris from the Hulk smashing into a building. He dies. He ends up in Hell, where he makes a deal with Mephisto to return, making him into Ghost Rider, but when he arrived back on Earth it was too late. Thanos was gone. He roamed the desolate planet and eventually encountered Galactus, who had come to conflict with Thanos. Castle would offer the World Devourer his services and become his herald, becoming the Cosmic Ghost Rider, or more simply, the Rider. They would travel the galaxy together for centuries in an attempt to stop Thanos' quest to kill every living being in the universe, but eventually Thanos confronted them and beheaded Galactus, then offered Castle another option. If he was the Mad Titan's servant instead, he could punish more evil than he'd ever imagine. There's more to the story from there, of course, but in terms of his relationship with Galactus, their partnership ended when the mighty entity's death occurred.
Number 3. Will Payton. There have been various superheroes in DC to take up the mantle of Starman, but Will Payton is the one that we are talking about here today. He was first introduced in the New Earth continuity in 1988 in Starman number 1. In both continuities, New Earth and Prime Earth, he gets his powers the same way after being hit with a beam of energy misfired from a satellite. But while the New Earth version of Payton died in the comics in 1992, he would get another chance at heroics in the New 52. Prime Earth Starman was introduced in Dark Knight's Metal number 1, and even went on to become a member of the Justice League. But during his time with the Justice League in Volume 4 of the series, during the year of the villain event, the Doom Arising issue, he met his end literally at the hands of Perpetua. Well, at least at one of her hands. She crushed him in her giant hand. This was just after Starman had felt and connected with the Starman who had come before him, and thought this gave him enough power to win. Sad, it didn't. He got squished.
And at number 2, Charles Xavier and Magneto in Dawn of X. Here's a case in which a team-up effectively led to the fate of a character being worse than death. The new Dawn of X reboot of the X-Men franchise now sees Charles Xavier and his X-Men having had enough. They're done relying on the hope that humanity can learn to accept mutant kind, done with the oppression that they've dealt with for decades. Xavier ends up teaming up with Magneto, with the two of them primarily calling the shots with the new mutant sovereign nation that exists on Krakoa. This new sovereign state demands that mutants who have committed crimes are accountable by their mutant laws versus human laws out in the regular world, with one of these mutant laws being that they do not kill other mutants. Enter Sabretooth, who has been up to no good and is apprehended by the Fantastic Four outside of Krakoa. Cyclops shows up to take him to Krakoa for the mutants there to be the ones to decide his punishment. When Cyclops takes him over there, Xavier exiles Sabretooth, sending him into what he calls a stasis, deep inside of Krakoa. The ground opened up and Creed was dropped into it. Xavier claims that he'll be in there forever, I quote, because that is how long mutant justice lasts. While he does note that Sabretooth might one day have the option to redeem himself, his fate is worse than any prison or death. To forever fall through the dark depths of a sentient creature for all of eternity? Yeah, yikes. That's like kinda savage, Xavier. You tolerate that, but you don't tolerate prisons? And finally, in at number 1, everybody during Crisis on Infinite Earths. Crisis on Infinite Earths is one of the most prominent crossovers in DC history, and an impactful one to boot. Essentially, the purpose of this crossover was to reboot the DC multiverse and create a single unified DC universe. The story itself involved everyone in DC's roster, for the most part, getting involved to prevent the Anti-Monitor from completely destroying the multiverse. The Monitor, his good counterpart, tries to recruit heroes from across the multiverse to help, but is murdered. And then Brainiac tries to take advantage of the situation, but ultimately, in the end, all of the heroes and all of the villains are brought together by the Spectre to work together. Crisis is known for its surprisingly high death toll, killing off the likes of heroes such as Kara Zor-El and Barry Allen, along with hundreds of other lives that were lost in the process before Anti-Monitor was defeated.
Number 10. Superman. The death of Superman. For those of you who've been here a while, you all know how Kelly feels about the death of Superman, but we're gonna talk about it. Superman died in the now famous, or for some infamous, Death of Superman arc. Superman was killed by the villain Doomsday in 1993, in a battle that was too much for the Man of Steel. And this was more than just a comic event. This made news. There were broadcasts about the death of Clark Kent, and people were sad. But contrary to popular belief, at the time, fans were aware it was a marketing ploy. While some may have been worried they may never see Superman again, most were like, oh, they're doing this to get more sales, because it was known that Superman wasn't selling that well at the time. Cynicism and savvy aren't modern inventions. Even if you look back at the coverage, people knew things. Superman would remain dead for a while, leading to the Reign of Superman arc. The images of Superman dead, cradled in a sobbing Lois's arms with his cape waving like a flag, are now iconic. They are pieces of comic book history. And even if you knew he was coming back, it still tugged at your heartstrings. Number 9. Quicksilver. Quicksilver from the MCU. Now, as many have said, this character could come back, but for now, at the time of this recording, he's dead. Quicksilver in the MCU was more a victim of dual ownership and wasted potential than anything else. Quicksilver appeared fully in the Age of Ultron, and he died in the same movie. He died as a human shield for Hawkeye because he was starting to form distinct relationships with members of the Avengers, and some were hoping he would stick around. However, there was another Quicksilver at the same time, a more popular Quicksilver over at Fox in the X-Men universe, pre-Disney purchase. And there's an unspoken rule that companies don't like having two of the same characters on the big screen at the same time. For most, they felt this death was a waste, as he could have been incorporated into the universe. At this point, it's been years since Age of Ultron came out in 2015, but some feel it was a missed opportunity. Guess he wasn't fast enough. Number 8. Captain America. No, we're not talking about Cap putting himself on ice, we're talking about the end of Civil War. Civil War the comic event, the first one from 2006, Civil War 1. After Tony and Steve's friendship was destroyed by the pro or anti-registration argument that escalated from 0 to 100 in a couple of panels, and it was about as subtle as Thor's hammer to the face, Cap put an end to hostilities after seeing all of the damage that him and the rest of the heroes were doing around them. They were fighting each other, it was real intense. However, after Cap surrendered himself, he was shot on the courthouse steps, and this did not go over well. Captain America is a cultural icon in the States. He stands for more than just a character. So when things happen with him, it tends to have a ripple effect. His death here after the whole Civil War arc hit some people hard. They said it was like the death of American values. This was Hydra Cap before Hydra Cap. Of course Cap came back, but this ending did not sit well with everyone.
And at number 7, Adam Warlock and Thanos. Adam Warlock and Thanos have had a long-running history of being adversaries, but once upon a time the two actually worked together. In his earlier spacefaring days, Adam would come across the Universal Church of Truth, an intergalactic religious organization led by a villain named Magus. Teaming up with Pip the Troll, Gamora, and her adoptive papa Thanos, the group opposed Magus, and then discovered that Magus is actually a future version of Warlock who had traveled back in time and was forced insane by the use of his soul gem. With the Mad Titan's help, he travels into the future and steals his own soul in an attempt to prevent his evil self from ever existing, effectively killing himself. It wasn't until after all that Warlock and Thanos would clash, with Thanos getting his mitts on the other Infinity Gems to cause havoc.
Number 6. Jean Grey, the Phoenix. The first time. The Phoenix and the Dark Phoenix sagas are now classic X-Men story arcs and were actually named that afterwards by fans. They are also home to a grand retcon once they concluded, wherein Jean was never truly the Phoenix at all, but rather it was a force that took her form and her body was in a cocoon under the ocean. This was 100% so that she was no longer responsible for killing billions of people when she blew up that solar system. Anyways, at the end of the trial of the Phoenix, Jean was able to recognize that she was out of control and couldn't handle the power in her body. So in order to save the universe from herself, she killed herself in front of Scott as he begged her not to. This was a tragic moment. Also, because this arc was a huge factor in making Jean popular, really popular in her own right. Jean's sacrifice was largely undone by the retcon, but it's still a classic moment.
Number 5. Eros. Not going to lie, I kinda like this death for Titan Eros, aka Star Fox, Thanos' brother. Star Fox first appeared in the comics in 1973 and has become a long-standing, albeit kind of odd, mainstay as time has progressed. He has been a member of the Avengers and is technically an Eternal. As such, he is super powerful and has a variety of superpowers, but the one that has become the most well known for him is his power of seduction. Sort of. He can basically make people fall in love with himself or with others using pheromones to influence their feelings and make them do whatever he wants. See what I mean when I'm talking about problematic powers? As such, he has been tried twice in the comics for sexual assault and was even at one point accused of being responsible for Thanos' violent and murderous exploits, as it was suspected that Star Fox had been responsible for making Thanos fall in love with death. He died trying to prevent the resurrection of his brother Thanos. Originally, Star Fox thought that Gamora would be the one to fulfill Thanos' prophecy of resurrection found in his will, and that he would return by taking hold of her body. Turned out that it wasn't Gamora he had to worry about though, but himself. While the Black Order worked to transfer Thanos' consciousness into Star Fox, Gamora was actually forced to kill Eros to prevent Thanos' return, though she felt bad about it.
Number 4. Logan. We're talking about the 2017 film that decided that you had enough happiness in your life. Time for some sadness. Logan was heralded as a retelling of the Old Man Logan comic, but it isn't really, not in story, but instead in tone. A dour, sad world where heroes have fallen and life is bleak. Seeing Logan fight to protect his daughter and a small cabal of mutants, even as his body begins to fail him, is heart-wrenching. All of this is as the movie moves towards its inevitable conclusion, that of his sacrifice. It's heartbreaking seeing him laying there while X-23 watches over him, but at the same time he gets to be at rest. It's another end of an era. Hugh Jackman is the Wolverine for many people, the only one they've known, and to see his end like that on screen, for some, was pretty touching.
Moving on to number 3, Avengers and Kang the Conqueror. This team up is slightly different than the others on our list. It involves trying to resurrect a character via a team up and then trying to kill one half of said team up unsuccessfully. Once upon a time, Kang the Conqueror teamed up with Earth's mightiest heroes, and it resulted in the death of the woman he loved. Or rather, she kinda just remained dead because they had previously kind of been responsible for her death and he was really sore about it, sort of. So in the Avengers issue 69, Kang goes to the Avengers and informs them that the Grandmaster has put him in a precarious position. If the Avengers can defeat the Grandmaster's champions, the Squadron Sinister, he'll give Kang the power of life over death, to resurrect Ravonna, Kang's love. Now for context, Ravonna was killed off prior when the Avengers and Kang clashed, having sacrificed herself in order to prevent Kang from being killed by a traitor. Now in this story, the Avengers won, but Kang gets foolish and uses his power to try to kill the Avengers instead, and fails to do so. Meaning he just kinda has to relive the pain of his love being dead again because he failed and it's his fault she's not alive this time. It's all very sad.
Number 2. Rorschach. Yes, the Watchman, the classic Alan Moore Watchman for this number. Each of the heroes within this work are meant to represent a different philosophical viewpoint when it comes to heroism. They are also all meant to be inherently flawed as people. In short, everyone is nuanced. Rorschach is broken. Once an idealistic hero, after seeing the brutality people are capable of, it shattered him and he became cold, distant, cynical, and pretty judgmental. However, part of what made the divide so great was his absolute faith in what is right and what is wrong, and a disbelief in how far some would stray from that. Hence, when Adrian, aka Ozymandias' plan is revealed at the end, he can't live with it, even while the others can maybe see their way to it being for the best. Rorschach's convictions are so great, as is his turmoil, that he demands Dr. Manhattan just kill him because he will reveal what happened. And as he stands there, tears streaming down his face, Dr. Manhattan does just that. Makes him explode. It's sad on a few levels. 1, to see a character so torn, and 2, because of the purity of heroics he believed in. It's kinda like witnessing the death of that, erased by the ends justify the means mentality of Adrian. It's a standout moment in a work full of standout moments. Finally, in at number 1, Captain Marvel, dying of cancer. We are here talking about Marvel's first Captain Marvel, Captain Marvel. He had a unique death. Well, him and the Question, but the Question happened later. His death involved him dying of cancer. It is not common for heroes to die of such relatable means, and it made his death all the sadder. It was a special space cancer that he caught by trying to save the galaxy, but you know, still. He died in the hospital surrounded by his friends, but received a surprise gift from his enemy, Thanos. He felt that he deserved a hero's death and organized for him to feel as though he was fighting in his last moments. This was until Captain Marvel felt he didn't need the illusion anymore and embraced death and walked off into the light with death and Thanos at his side. It was a big moment and it felt climactic. He would be succeeded by the second Captain Marvel, Monica Rambeau.
Number 10. Nora West Allen. Also known as XS, Nora West Allen from the Arrowverse is Barry and Iris' daughter from an alternate timeline. She's from the future of Earth 1 and was named after Iris' mother, Nora. She met her end in Season 5, Episode 22 of The Flash, when she chose to be erased from existence rather than take refuge in the Negative Speed Force. Nora's erasure from existence began as a result of Team Flash defeating Cicada and destroying his dagger, which altered the timeline that Nora was from. With a final heartfelt embrace, Nora said goodbye to her parents as she faded away. Number 9. Black Widow. While Black Widow has died in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, we still have her standalone film, which is supposed to be a prequel, coming out soon. I say supposed to be because I don't fully trust any of the details that Marvel shares with us about the films. They have lied to us before, and they could be trying to psych us out again, you never know. Though I don't think that they are trying to mislead us on this fact, but I'm just putting it out there in case it happens. I just want to say, you heard it here first, folks. They're always playing mind games with us. Anyways, we shall see. Natasha Romanoff met her end in Avengers Endgame when she sacrificed herself in order to acquire the Soul Stone so that the Avengers could return all those who had been lost in the snap. Ah, self-sacrifice. Always the best superhero way to go in my mind. Gotta save those people, gotta die so I can save everyone. Number 8. Iron Man. Tony Stark also met his end in Avengers Endgame in the MCU. His end happened on the big screen as a result of him being the one to wield the deadly Infinity Gauntlet. The amount of energy and power that it took for Iron Man to use the Infinity Gauntlet was so great that it ended up killing him. Though at least he was able to hold on long enough to say a heartfelt goodbye to some of his loved ones, namely Spider-Man and Pepper Potts. And it was so cute. In the comics, it was actually Adam Warlock who wields the gauntlet, but Warlock was so powerful that this didn't result in his death. In the comics, that is. While we have yet to see Warlock in the MCU as of yet, it is likely that we'll be introduced to him in the films during Guardians of the Galaxy 3. And who knows, although we had a funeral for Tony Stark and a huge send-off for him, there is still a chance that we could see him return in some form via more pre-recorded holograms or as an AI. I know Robert Downey Jr. said he's done playing Iron Man, but you know, it could still happen. And Hugh Jackman could come back as Wolverine, you know what I mean? It could happen.
Number 7. Green Arrow, Crisis on Infinite Earths. Crisis on Infinite Earths is now not only a giant event from 1985, but a mega event in the CW television Arrowverse. It was the end of an era, the end of Oliver Queen, and Arrow, signaling the start of an Arrowverse, well, without Arrow. It was rumored for a while that the end of Crisis would see the end of Ollie, but for many, it was like the end of an entire era. His funeral was a veritable who's who of every character who had returned in Crisis, which was quite the cast of characters. For many who have been following the Arrowverse since it started, this was quite the moment. People can joke, but hey, we all have our shows that touch us and that we follow. Pour one out for Oliver Queen.
Number 6. Translucent. In Amazon's live-action television adaptation of The Boys, Huey gets his first kill in a different way than in the comic series. One of the first major deaths of the show happens when Huey makes the choice to take out a member of the Seven. Translucent is a superhero in the world of The Boys who can turn himself invisible, but not in the way you'd normally expect. He can transform himself into a diamond form, which causes him to appear invisible due to the way his diamond form warps light around him. Translucent met his end when the boys realized that they couldn't actually kill him by cutting into him because his skin is basically impenetrable. So instead what they had to do was they had to insert explosives in him. I won't tell you how they did that because I don't think I'm allowed to say that on YouTube. Eventually he worked his way out to escape, but as that was happening, Huey had a change of heart and decided ultimately to kill Translucent by blowing him up from the inside. Yeah. What a way to go. It's actually more graphic than the first kill that Huey has in the comics too, which is pretty crazy because The Boys is a pretty graphic and violent comic series.
Moving on to number 5, Hank Pym and Ultron. Oh, Hank. Oh, Hank. Come on, Hank. Hank Pym has had it rough. Most recently, he was manipulated by Ultron, appearing to have merged with the robot after the Rage of Ultron storyline. At first, it seemed as if it was a mutual decision, but as the story went on, it became clear that Ultron was calling the shots and doing the driving, so to speak. It just seems that Hank can never truly control his creation, and his weird feelings of sentimentality towards his robotic son will always result in his downfall some way. The whole thing ended with Hank getting his soul devoured by a demonic entity that lives inside of the Soul Stone in Soul World, seemingly killing him. But we're pretty sure that he'll be back, and hopefully not just as a sentient robot skin jacket.
Number 4. Heimdall. What a rough go. We've now lost Heimdall in both the Marvel Cinematic Universe and in the comics. At least for now anyways. Fingers crossed his death does not stick. Heimdall is known as one of the wisest and oldest beings on Asgard. Odin made him the guardian of the Rainbow Bridge Bifrost, which connects Asgard to Midgard, aka Earth. In the new Valkyrie series with Jane Foster taking up the mantle as Valkyrie, we saw Heimdall bite the dust. Man, he bit it hard too. He died protecting Jane in a fight against Bullseye. Bullseye with a sword no less, which is kinda weird, but I also kinda like it. Unfortunately, during the fight he was stabbed and later died of his injuries after being Spartan kicked 300 style off of a building. Youch.
Number 3. Jason Todd. Jason Todd died by a vote, call in to decide whether he lives or dies, and his death was tragic for many reasons. Not only did many deem this vote unfair and cynical, but they also felt that to kill a teen was too dark. However, paradoxically for many, Jason had never been more interesting than he was right before he died, and it was his death and over time the increased sense that it was unfair that fueled the character's popularity enough for his return, or for him to stick around after he returned. Jason would most likely not be as loved as he is had he not died as he did. His death and its legacy, both in canon and outside of it, are part of what has made him the character he is today. The iconic images of Batman holding his impressively intact corpse, that of Jason Todd, are ones that have gone down in comic book history. The building exploded. There should be goo.
Number 2. Green Arrow. In the Arrowverse, Oliver Queen died multiple times during the Crisis on Infinite Earth story arc, and he didn't go alone. He was also accompanied by many heroes from CW's Arrowverse, as well as almost everyone from Earth 2. After 8 seasons, it was time for Green Arrow to come to a close, and Oliver Queen went out with the last season. His first death happened as a result of him sacrificing himself to save billions from Earth 38. He was then resurrected by John Constantine and returned in a Lazarus pit on Earth 18, only to later be destroyed by antimatter. Finally, he came back as the Spectre. Hal Jordan's like, hey, that's my thing, only to sacrifice himself once more in order to recreate Earth Prime and resurrect some of the fallen heroes. So in other words, I guess Oliver Queen was Hal Jordan in that story arc, in the TV show anyways. In the comics, sounds a lot of like what Hal Jordan's doing. Number 1. Stan Lee. Stan Lee died on November 12th of 2018, over a year ago. Still, he remains one of the greatest heroes that we got out of comics. He was inspirational, never picked favorites, although I think Spider-Man might have been his true fave, like secretly. Always appeared to be a genuinely positive person. Stan helped to create Marvel, transforming it from Timely Comics into the publisher that we know and love today. He started his career in editing at just 19 years old, and during his time with Marvel worked to completely redefine the way comics and comic book characters were written, making the process more efficient and streamlined and adding more depth to characters in the comic book world, creating superheroes who felt more grounded and real. Without him, we likely wouldn't have the Marvelverse as it is today, and many of the characters within it that we know and love. If that didn't make Stan the Man Lee super, I do not know what will make any of us super, to be honest. A lot of the time when we talk about the death of comic book heroes, we know that they are just comic book deaths, and somehow, someway, we'll likely see them return eventually. But with Stan Lee, his death is one of the most permanent ones, and the most world-altering in comic book history. Unless he comes back as a Marvel zombie, which I would be down for, and I would read that comic.